Hello, you're watching and listening to the Market Makers in the Middle East and Africa podcast. This is your host Abrar Hussain. Welcome to the podcast, Francisco. You're a established business leader. You have worked across the world, Asia, Europe, US. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your story, Francisco.
So, first of all, thank you for having me. As everything in life is a little bit of half luck and half effort. So it just means that I happen to be in the right place at the right time where the industry started transforming during the late .com days. And I was a transaction banker with HSBC. And then we started seeing the industry transforming, and we got involved in what was in the old days the .com. Post-banking experience went back into consulting, but ultimately the team remained. And as a virtue of the industry where I specialize originally payments, that is still the major part of a significant part of my work. That's where digital and convergent digital technologies happen to drive a lot of change with converging business models, the emergence of new distribution channels, new way of transacting, all the value of data, because ultimately an exchange of value is not necessarily a monetary exchange. And with that, over time, the opportunity to work more and more into digital transformation came up to the point that now it is almost split evenly on a 50-50 basis. So that's in a nutshell.
Perfect. So you now you're a partner at Arkwright Consulting. What do you do with them and what regions you are covering?
So Arkwright Consulting is a boutique strategy firm originating from the Nordics. It operates on a global staffing model, so there is no particular focus on a region. It's very much driven by opportunity and demand. So while I personally have a focus on the region, at the same time, I'm working across Europe and finished recently a project in Asia and so on. So it is a matter of knowing where we can make a difference, and whenever there is an opportunity to and the privilege to be considered to support a customer, then that's how business happens.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Francisco. As we're talking about the Middle East and Africa, you have said that you have worked in Asia, in Europe. How do you find Middle East region and Africa region different from the other regions that you have worked across? What is mainly different here from opportunities, from culture, how do you see it?
So first of all, Middle East and Africa is a very entrepreneurial type of culture. To be true, a little bit similarly to what we've seen in Asia. This notwithstanding that Fintech as an industry is entrepreneurial by definition globally. Secondly, we need to make a distinction because Middle East and Africa is a very large region with pockets of countries that operate within a very different economic context. Like if we take the Middle East, in the Middle East we are having a lot of economic growth. It's like at current rate, it is forecasted to be the global region with the highest growth for 2022, 2023. On the other side, there is the scale of opportunity is quite significant. So overall, this is a part of the world where we're going to see a lot of activity. Now, comparing other parts of the world, there's other interesting areas where there's economic opportunity. South America is another one. What is going to come first in terms of getting on a rapid development curve? It is to be seen, but very much is going to be driven by the ability to attract talent, to provide an environment that is conducive to investment to take place, for companies to emerge. And on the other side, nonetheless, we need also to take in account the size of the opportunity of the underlying economy. What is the white space, what is the potential for improvement that is there untapped, waiting to be developed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Francesco. You mentioned that Middle East and Africa is a vast region, and we see in coming years a very good growth. Now we're talking about a region which is around 60 countries, $6 trillion of economy, and then 20% of world population. How do you see the banking landscape or fintech landscape in coming years, specific to, I know there might be a bit difference in Africa, which might be a bit different than Middle East or GCC countries. How do you see fintech evolving in the coming years?
So there's a lot of activity and a lot of rapid development. This has started a little bit later to the wave of fintech development that we've seen, for example, in Europe or in North America. But what is also happening, we see regulators that are very much fostering local initiatives. And this is really, really important, because if we want to create and capture economic growth in an environment in which there is an unmet opportunity, or there is potential to be leveraged, is a matter of balancing out what could be the contribution of foreign players and what could be developed and captured by local companies that are going to create local employment and foster the development of local talent and so on. So once again, we are talking about a very, very vast region where governments have very different type of attention and focus and attitudes towards the fintech sector. Nonetheless, this is universally seen as an opportunity. It is just that different parts of the region have different characteristics.
Perfect. And given the Africa, the kind of population we have, specifically in Nigeria and Kenya, and we're seeing a lot of new companies like M-Pesa and other ones came in. How do you see that, is it like there is a lot of scope for the local startups to come? And are the opportunities on the payment side or insurtech side? So how do you see that in Africa?
So that's a very vast topic. So let's start with the telcos. M-Pesa is an initiative that was developed by Safaricom, that is the local subsidiary of Vodafone. So it is very much a local, and we have a number of local operators, MTN and so on, that have been driving for the last 15 years the mobile money revolution. So this is not excluding the opportunity for smaller players to come in, because ultimately those organizations have established rails that have been leveraged as a distribution channel to partnership and so on by established players like banks, as well as by new entrants. We got a significant transformation and evolution in terms of infrastructure. What was basic telecom data and voice communication now is evolving more into the data capability. And as this is rolled out, as the affordability of handsets is increasing, and we're moving away from feature phones that still remain a very important type of channel and type of interface in the region, in particular for Africa. We got more smartphone adoption, and as this happens, there is a very different type of user interface, ability to develop applications that operate in a different way with a completely different degree of sophistication. So overall, going back to your question, there is quite a scale of opportunity. Which sector is going to happen? Payment has traditionally been a large part of the fintech world. Depending on the country, it can range between 50 to 30% on average of the total fintech activity. But for example, if we look at insurtech, InsurTech is not a mainstream part of fintech. If we look at MENA, majority of InsurTech operators are in the United Arab Emirates. But on the other side, if we take a country like Nigeria, where 0.4% of the population have an insurance product of some sort, so the penetration of this type of services is very small, then it is intuitive to understand that there is a massive opportunity to be tapped. And this type of combination is not the only one that we could mention. Like there are opportunities around wealth tech, there are opportunities around reg tech. There's different parts of the fintech industry that are very, very much applicable throughout the region.
So you see still that there can be a lot of things that can be done specifically in the Africa region. And how do you see the GCC, which is Saudi, which is in UAE, or the parts of the Gulf region? I see a lot of companies coming on BNPL side. So how do you see, apart from BNPL, where do you see a lot of activities happening, or where do you see the opportunities in the GCC region, in UAE, Saudi?
In this region, some countries have taken an active move to become very welcoming and fostering the development around cryptocurrencies and blockchain and so on. There is a universal growth of buy now, pay later globally, even if with buy now pay later we can open up a bracket because it's an industry that has become oversupplied and has somehow backfired depending on the region. So other areas of fintech, we got open banking coming in the region. That is going to foster a wave of innovation. And in particular, we got the rollout of real-time payments for small value transactions. These are going to be very important rails for innovation taking place, given the potential for payment modernization that there is in countries that are predominantly cash-driven.
So open banking, which you touched as a significant buzzword that we are hearing. If for a kind of a layman, if you want to explain what is open banking, how you will explain it, and then I'll come to my second question.
Okay. So once again, we got a question that can be pretty vast. Open banking as a wave of development takes the origin from a regulatory initiative in Europe with the revision of the first Payment Service Directive, like Payment Service Directive 2, that was very much intended to create and foster competition and foster innovation into the European market, with the aim of seeing the emergence of one or more European payment champions operating on different rails, and with the aim of creating a more conducive environment for third parties to innovate on banking. So what is open banking? Open banking is the ability for a licensed third party to operate upon customer mandate on either instigating a payment or accessing information on an account. Now, you mentioned layman terms. What does it mean for an SME? It's the ability, for example, to see all their account data consolidated in one single interface, to automate balance sweeping, to instigate payments through interfaces that are completely third-party compared to a banking app. Now, all of this can introduce convenience, will introduce an element of increased competition. There will be opportunities to innovate on the basis of data. Like, for example, there are significant buy now, pay later models that are based on short-term scoring that are developed over the transaction behavior of a customer over the last 2-3 months of transaction. So this is just one of the many examples. Now, open banking is now transforming into open finance, where the remit of providing access to information and information exchange through APIs is not limited to the transaction information on current account, but is broadened up to saving products, to insurance products, and so on and on and on. This is potentially taking even a further step, because ultimately we got parts of the world where the financial services industry is starting pushing and proposing a wider information exchange, where it's not just the transaction information that is exchanged with third parties, but where these third parties that are holding different type of information about customer, for example, basket content and so on, may exchange the information back.
So if I understood correctly, if I have accounts with few banks, then I can have one interface, the other parties or the ecosystem can access that data, be it the BNPL players or be it the payment companies or be it telcos, so they have access
or
to
a lender
Okay.
Or it can be simply a service provider that is offering SME type of solutions, that is aggregating the balances and the transaction flows, complementing it with the invoice information, and out of that having the ability to provide small business cash management and liquidity solutions that are typical of much larger organizations.
So a lot of things happening in finance or the banking space, fintechs coming in, BNPL, new payments players, and then open banking. How do you see the banks in the region, be it, in the Middle East or in the Africa? How do you see the banking system change in coming years, or what they can do to stay relevant?
The banks in the region are proving, from what we are seeing, the conversation we're having, very much forthcoming and in terms of digital transformation. There is the benefit of 20 years of experience in other parts of the world with eminent case studies to refer to in terms of adoption of technologies and changes of business models. And what we are seeing is the banks here being very upfront in looking at opportunities and investment. Now, all of this will drive an element of selectivity, simply because if everybody is moving in the same direction, then you will end up having over competition with the same value proposition. Nonetheless, the opportunities that are provided by technology, digital technology, are quite significant. So there are pockets of niche business models that could be pursued quite profitably. For example, if we talk about SMEs and micro SMEs, this is a traditional segment and part of the economy that has been left somehow underserved, unaddressed by the traditional banking industry in many countries. This has some obvious reasons, like first of all, the cost to serve, some inherent limitation in the natural business of some of these small companies. Like when you have an entrepreneur running a business, typically the focus is on sales and production, not on accounting, managing relationship with lenders, adopting technology on their own side, and so on. But what we have seen is the emergence, almost globally, of very niche product and proposition that are aimed and tailored for this type of industry. And there are others. So overall, what we are seeing with the banks here, there's a lot of attention and a lot of eagerness in taking advantage of the new digital technologies. That will drive some champions, some regional champions to emerge.
Perfect. And you mentioned that the serving SMEs can be a good advantage, and so that they can, but they have to innovate, develop products so that they can have a scale and serve them efficiently, right?
It's one of the many markets. So if we look at the bigger pool of untapped opportunity, the underserved segments are one of them. Right? There are obvious considerations to be paid in terms of affordability, fragmentation, cost to serve, and so on. But
thank you for that, Francesco, for sharing that. Now, coming to another point which you mentioned before, that though telco and banking are kind of very different industry, but we see a bigger play from telcos because of their reach to consumers. Their, again, established relationship on the infrastructure side with various banks and various, businesses. We see them coming into fintech space or payment space in a lot of countries. M-Pesa is one example. How do you see telcos playing in the region on that perspective, becoming, digital banks or becoming, big fintech players on the payment side, on BNPL side, or maybe on the insurtech side? How do you see the role of telcos in the banking or fintech space?
Well, telcos have played a major role in the region for quite some time by now, and they've been driving financial inclusion, economic development with the emergence of business models around mobile money. They have a very strong position and a moat, to be true, given the scale of their reach, given the ability to cover the last mile for a transaction through their agent networks. And there is a lot of complementarity and investment that they paid into in the fintech space. Now, it is to be said that as of today, there's a number of telco operators in Africa that are becoming outright banks. So there is a recognition of the opportunity. If we look at what has happened over the last 10 years, the degree, the penetration of banking service, the number of bank customers has increased at about 4-5% in total. While at the same time, if we look at the mobile money customers, that multiple is 2-3 times, 2 pair, 3 pair.
Mm-hmm. And mainly, I think in the unbanked sector, the growth is quite huge.
Yes. Because what happened and what we've seen across a number of different markets is that as the services were rolled out, as they became pervasive, as merchants, shops started accepting mobile money for payments, there's been elements of the population that have recognized the advantage or given preference to mobile money versus the current account. So we've seen in some countries like Kenya, a migration of bank customers to mobile money.
Wow.
And this is a phenomenon that has happened over the last 10 years. The two sectors are very much complementary and covering the universe of need. Ultimately, whenever we're driving innovation, it is about customer need. Mm-hmm. Technology for the sake of technology is not really creating value. Technology is an enabler. Mm-hmm. But what really matters, where the focus is, ultimately it is about the value that is created for the customer and how this can become value created and captured for a provider. And telcos have been incredibly good at capturing the space at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing the same thing happening now in Brazil, not in the case of telco, but with technology innovation out of the rollout of real-time and open banking with PIX. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Significant part of the population underserved with the need of store value in a secure way, monetary value in a secure way, to make payments in a cost-effective way, alternative to cash. And all of a sudden, we have a significant adoption of an electronic payment method based on real time that is mirroring the growth that we've seen with mobile money in some other region. Ultimately, it is all about the customer need.
One of the things that I have seen, and we were discussing in Asia, right, that they have a lot of super apps. And here what we're seeing, we have food delivery companies, we have BNPL companies, we have other fintech kind of providers, then other home services providers. Do you see here a consolidation happening, or maybe the emergence of super apps, one or two people becoming big and trying to serve most of the services that can be provided? How do you see that play coming here in the whole region?
Super apps are very much an Asia phenomena. Starting with chat, then with the emergence of Line and Grab and Gojek and so on. And there's a number of others, including some that are being developed and driven by banks. That there is a very good case in Thailand of that. Now, there is an opportunity for a similar application to emerge, but the degree of complexity and the number of market conditions and moves from the side of a provider that need to take place in order for something like that to appear in a market are quite a few. So there is a global aspiration out of any business to be a platform and ecosystem, given the type of premium that these type of business models are capturing, and they are being recognized by the markets and investors. Nonetheless, the degree of complexity for something like this to happen are quite significant. Now, platform and ecosystems are two very different business models. Both of them have an element of facilitation, so the actual business is facilitating transactions more than actually delivering on them. But they have a completely different degree of articulation. If we take a super app, is whenever a set of different providers are articulating their value proposition within a wrapper of a thematic customer journey. Now, the degree of complementarity is very, very important for something like this to emerge. The other element that you need to have is a very, very frequent type of interaction within the context of the thematic journey. And so there are players that potentially could become the next Uber. We have in Africa the emergence of about 4 transport platforms, ride-hailing platforms. Those could mirror the trajectory potentially on Me Too that has been followed by others. That there's an element of aspiration, that making it happen is another story. For those who are thinking of starting from a payment perspective, I think that it is important to remind that in reality none of us make a payment for. No consumer makes a payment for the sake of making a payment. There's an activity, there's an underlying activity. So while it is important to be able to facilitate such transaction, it is the nature of the transaction that is really driving the value for the consumer and the value for the application.
So coming to another question, Francesco, we talked about BNPL, we talked about payments and all. What other niche areas you see for fintech in different regions in the Middle East and Africa?
So that's a very interesting question. Let's start having a look at what's happening in the world of retail. There is now, after the pandemic, there's a return to in-store shopping. There's a little bit of demand for personal contact, but ultimately there is still a very large potential for online commerce, either through computer or even more so on mobile, to keep growing. And if we look at Africa, the rates and penetration of e-commerce are still leaving quite a bit of potential compared to other parts of the world. We got the emergence of very nice marketplaces, value proposition, and so on that create convenience and attractiveness for customers. So we have the need for businesses to go online, to be able to operate and sell through these online channels and to accept payments. So there is still quite a significant scale in the payment space. Now, with the emergence of mobile operators, the fragmentation of the different payment methods, there is still quite a scale space for quite an opportunity for orchestrator and merchant aggregator interfaces to emerge. In particular, in Africa, the rollout of real time is going to create another set of opportunities, very similar to what we've seen, for example, in Asia with the emergence of some of the mobile wallets. Is this an opportunity for fintech, for banks, for large retailers? Is something to be seen, but nonetheless, the market is very conducive for innovation. InsurTech is another space, another area for potential growth. Similarly, we got other areas like RegTech, WealthTech. Different segments are offering different opportunity. It is a matter of finding the right way of leveraging technology to reach the right customer with a service that is priced at the right level in order to be affordable and to reach a sufficient critical scale.
Perfect. I mean, thank you, Francesco, on that. Now we see a trend globally where fintechs raise the big rounds. The valuation were, very lofty, and now we see a kind of a correction happening. Fundraising is a bit difficult and all. What do you advise the new fintech startups or the new ventures? How to raise funds, or what they should do to be lean and to kind of not disappear in this kind of a gloomy fundraising environment?
First of all, it is a matter of being very realistic around the business opportunity. Investors have become very, very selective. And this is not a free money for all type of environment anymore. That there's a number of pre-characteristics or preconditions that need to be met. Focus on cash flow. If I'm a fintech in the current environment, I need to make sure to have sufficient liquidity to be able to keep funding growth and manage that very carefully, cash flow wise, for the next couple of years. There is very much a focus on economic results, so aiming to reach a positive EBITDA operating results, if not a position of cash neutrality. Any growing company is absorbing cash, but it is very, very important to show a trend, if not positive results, with very tangible and credible paths and dynamics.
So you're saying that be cautious with growth, spending, and manage the cash flows, and be realistic in the expectation. Thank you for that. So my last question, Francesco. You started your career with HSBC 20 years back. So much change has happened in the banking industry. How do you see the banks in the region can stay relevant in the coming time?
It is about transforming, evolving the business in a way that address market needs, improves on efficiency and effectiveness of organization. So digital technologies have their own sense when they create and capture value. And ultimately, the first value creation is from the customer side. In order to be able to do all of this, the transformation is quite pervasive. And we got amazing banks that have managed to transform themselves around the globe that we can look at as a reference. So it is about identifying the right market opportunities, the right white spaces, the right value proposition where we can make a difference, can create a distinctive position. being able to invest into the right type of technologies, process transformation, but ultimately it is all around people and leadership. It is an element of attracting the right talent, retaining the right skills, having the right type of mentality change, driven with proper awareness of market and of the opportunities that is going to select or drive who are going to be the winner and losers in this space. There's going to be an element of internationalization, simply because, like any business, for the vast majority, there's a relevance of scale and scope. And as we know, there's geographical characteristics can provide opportunity, but also can be a limiting factor in some instances. So overall, it is about digital transformation, but it is also about the overall evaluation, identification, and capturing of opportunities beyond borders.
Perfect. So you mentioned finding a right niche, investing in the right technology, and having the right people to drive change and grow beyond this one specific country and develop further. Thank you, Francesco. It was a pleasure to have you, and I hope the seat was comfortable. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Francesco.
Yeah.